Let's bring in former Liberal advisor David Gazzard, now with DPG Advisory, and former Labor advisor Eamonn Fitzpatrick with Fitzpatrick Advisory. David Gazzard, the Yes campaign for The Voice, a couple of big names on there. In fact, it's a heavy hitter board, including a few of your former colleagues.
Yeah, well, we've just seen that Mark Textor, who also, there's no real surprises there, he was involved in the Statement of the Heart process, so he has a long association with sort of the Voice. But Tony Nutt has joined as well. Tony, it's good to see someone like Tony on there. He was Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Howard through the intervention, so he will have a very, very good understanding of some of the issues that some of these communities are facing.
Eamonn Fitzpatrick, what's your take on that with the likes of Mark Textor, Tony Nutt, but other heavy hitters in the corporate world, Michael Chaney, Catherine Tanner and others?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's a great day for that campaign. Talk about momentum. This is something that I think it's needed in recent times. But I will say this too, people are making all sorts of assumptions about who will support and who won't support. And I think this just goes to show that actually there is a substantial degree of support from all corners of Australian society. And I think it's a great example of that. From a political perspective, though, if I was Peter Dutton today, I would be scratching my head a bit. I think he's come out of the blocks far too early and sort of making clear his concerns and his opposition. He obviously, he'll have an opportunity to try and recast his position if that's what he wants to do when he gets together and talks to members of that committee. But it's a great day, I think, for the campaign, and I think it will cause people to sit up and listen and have a look at actually who is involved and why they are involved.
Dominic Perrottet, David, a very forceful supporter of The Voice. He spoke to Andrew Clennell earlier and articulated his support very clearly. So it does highlight the differences that Mr Dutton's got to try and navigate within his party.
Well, it's not like the coalition is completely united over the no case. I think where this whole campaign struggles has been highlighted by what's happened over the last 2 weeks in Alice Springs. You've got people sort of saying, well, we need a vote yes to liberate voices, but it is exactly the voices that have been ignored for 30 years in this that are still championing the same issues around alcohol, education, welfare, policing that have been ignored by the NT Labor government and by the government here. So it's not a matter of really constitutional recognition to fix some of those practical problems, although that may be necessary. I think the Australian public would quite happily vote absolutely yes if they saw that recognition was going to address some of those problems. But it's the perfect microcosm of saying, well, no one out there is actually calling for a yes vote. They're actually saying, let's delay it. The Labor member for Lingiari and the Coalition Senator for the Northern Territory are both saying, let's deal with the other issues, the practical issues, before we worry about a yes vote. So great to have kind of a bipartisan spirit either way, but it's sort of running parallel to some of the practical problems that these communities are facing.
The Prime Minister will receive that report from the Central Australia Regional Controller, Darrell Anderson, today, Eamonn, and he says he's going to act as soon as possible on it. He's very, very keen to show that he's responding and trying to deal with it, but the challenge for the government, as it has been for governments as long as you and I can remember, is to get something that is sustainable, that works over a medium and longer term as well.
Yeah, and it highlights one of the challenges we have as a nation. We have many rural and remote communities, many, and the challenges of service delivery remain. And this is a very strong example of that. Sure, the problems have gone on for years and years and years, but ultimately this will be a challenge of delivering those services, getting help to where it's needed. But you can only do that not just if you have the money, but you need the people on the ground to be able to do that. And if there's no place for them to be, if there's no infrastructure, if there's no community infrastructure around to get people out there, we're going to have a challenge. And whether it's Alice Springs or any other regional centre, that has an issue. On the upside, though, finally we are starting to see, I think, the beginnings of much more stronger action on the ground that'll bring governments and will bring people together. And just going back to David's point around the voice is not enough in itself to fix something like this, but we can do both, and I think we actually need to do both. We need to recognise the problems on the ground and how governments need to get in there and fix it and provide lasting solutions and services, but we also need to understand, going hand in hand with that, as we move forward, we need to give Indigenous Australians their voice. Because as Zoe Daniel said, she wants to be able to hear from people when she is thinking through the issues and when she is doing her bit to make laws.
David, just finally to you, that's the point that Eamonn makes. I think in a political sense, if we move beyond the sort of the merits of the voice itself to the political ramifications, those Teal seats you would think would be overwhelmingly in favour.
I think they will be, but it sort of goes to the duality of Australia at the moment. You got people in inner city areas who believe that reconciliation is really all about voting yes, when really those communities are complete lawless messes, with the MPs that actually live there saying, let's address the issues that we've been talking about, by the way, for years and years and years, and no one has listened. So it's fine to have the voice and to be listening to people finally, if that's what happens, but it's not like no one has been on the ground making these points over the last 3 decades and beyond. They've all made the points. In fact, they made the points, the NT government, around alcohol restrictions, and they were ignored. So now we've got to go back and recast that decision, overrule that decision, because no one did listen to the voices on the ground.
David, Eamonn, talk to you next week. Thank you as always.